Let me begin this part of our time together this afternoon with a reading from Paul's letter to the Philippians. I want to read from the 3rd chapter, and I'm reading this afternoon from Eugene Peterson's paraphrase of the Scriptures known as the Message, from the 3rd chapter of Philippians. By no means do I count myself an expert in all of this, but I've got my eye on the goal, where God is beckoning us onward to Jesus. I'm off and running. I'm not turning back. So let's keep focused on that goal, those of us who want everything God has for us. Now, if any of you have something else in mind, something less than total commitment, God will clear your blurred vision. You'll see it yet. Now that we're on the right track, let's stay on it. Stick with me, friends. Keep track of those you see running this same course, headed for this same goal. I hope that over the last 2.5 years, you've discovered that my passion is about the things of God, about following Jesus with wholehearted commitment. And that passion then is extended to a desire, a fervent desire, that more and more people come into that relationship with Jesus Christ that brings life and hope and joy to their lives and that transforms communities and transforms the world. We're very clear about the mission of the church. I'm clear about that. The discipline has it in these words. We are to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. That's what drives us. As Paul says, that's the goal. That's the goal toward which we are running. But we've been very clear now in developing the vision of how we're going to accomplish that mission. We've begun to see across the Western North Carolina Conference that our vision is about cultivating and developing healthy, thriving, vital congregations that are extending the mission of Christ in their community and around the world. Congregations where people are coming into a relationship with Christ and then living out as faithful disciples in the world. Back in 2009 at our annual conference, I laid out some goals for the conference. I thought as we had been talking together, as I'd been traveling around the conference, that these goals began to identify how we might accomplish that goal. Later on, we began to call them the power of 3 goals. They are still in effect. 300,000 members of the United Methodist Church across Western North Carolina Conference. 30,000 more people in worship. 3,000 mission teams going out into communities and into the world. 300 revitalized churches. 30 new congregations. Now we're at about the halfway point in that original goal that we had laid out. And I can report that we're doing very well in some and not so well in others. Over the last 2 years, every year, we've sent out in excess of 3,000 mission teams. We're doing that one very well. We're on our way to revitalizing 300 churches, and it's exciting to watch how God is working in the lives of some of our churches. But the others, we've gone the wrong way in terms of membership and worship attendance. And we've not started as many churches as we hoped we would. And so the goal is still there. And like Paul, as he writes in Philippians, I'm going to keep running toward that goal because we believe we're on the right track. It's all about the mission of Jesus Christ. Now, I know it's one thing for me to say that. It's one thing for me to challenge all of you and all of our churches to reach those goals. So what we've learned in this time is that we're going to have to develop some of those training courses and seminars, and we're going to have to develop ways to provide workshops to help all of us retool, get excited about what God is doing in our midst. I'm hoping for preaching and teaching that lead to warm hearts that in turn lead to transformed lives and a transformed world. We're developing scorecards and dashboards. Our conference team on congregational vitality, as well as the Council of Bishops and our United Methodist Church's connectional table, are working on scorecards to help us identify how we're doing in reaching those goals. A lot of attention has been paid recently to the call to action, the effort on the part of the general church beyond Western North Carolina Conference to alter the future of United Methodism, not only here in the United States, but around the world. We've identified what we've called the adaptive challenge, the challenge that will drive us into the future. It is this: to redirect the flow of attention, energy, and resources to an intense concentration on fostering and sustaining an increase in the number of vital congregations. It's exactly what we're hoping for, praying for, and working on here in Western North Carolina Conference, to redirect the flow of attention, energy, resources to help existing churches as well as new churches focus on the mission of the church. At this session of the annual conference, the mission and the vision are paramount. It's all about making disciples. It's all about being vital congregations and how we move in that direction. We're going to be asking the conference to take some important steps, initial steps that will lead us toward fulfilling that mission, turning our attention, turning our resources toward the local churches. So we have to make some critical choices. We desperately need to start new churches to reach a growing population in North Carolina, the fastest growing state in the South in the first decade of the 21st century. We need to be reaching more people, both through new churches and through existing churches. So we need to help those churches that are currently in existence to move off of status quo, out of mediocrity, toward reaching new people and fulfilling the mission of Christ. We're going to have to shift some of our resources away from administration and away from some of the traditional institutional maintenance things toward fulfilling the mission. We're going to have to find new ways to lead, new ways to serve in a very different economic climate, as well as that ever-changing reality in which we all live. After many conversations with many people across our conference, I'll be recommending to this session of the annual conference that we reduce the number of districts no later than January 2013. This is a conversation that's been going on for several months now as we've looked at a lot of different issues. We believe this is the time to do it. But questions come. Why wait until January 2013? Well, there are a lot of ramifications around changing district lines, and we envision that any kind of reconfiguration of districts will impact all of the current 15 districts. There will be significant property issues. There will be legal issues. All of those take time to handle. And in addition, we will need another round of appointment making to absorb the loss of positions that are currently held by district superintendents. Now, the discipline's very clear. The only thing that the annual conference votes on is the number of districts. The bishop is assigned the responsibility of drawing the lines, of creating the organization, of aligning the resources. Now, let me assure you that I will not approach that task by myself. I would envision appointing a transition team to help with those kinds of decisions that will have to be made. Another question that's come to me is why are we reducing when we just expanded the number of districts 3 years ago? Well, perhaps the most basic answer to that is that the financial and the economic reality in our conference, in our country, in the world changed dramatically less than 10 months after that February 2008 decision. Since then, most of you, almost every church across our conference has had to struggle with the realities of a changing giving patterns. They've had to reduce staff. They've had to reconfigure how they do their mission and their ministry. The conference has already made some of those hard choices, but we have to make others. The budget number is sobering. Each year since we've made that decision, we have had to take between $200,000 and $250,000 from the reserve fund to pay for the districts and the superintendents. That is not good stewardship. It's not sound financial practices, and it cannot be sustained for very long. But the decision about reducing the number of districts is only partially financial. It is primarily about the mission, the vision, the priorities that we've set for the conference. We've become more and more clear that God is calling us into some of these new directions. And it's time for us to redirect the flow, to change the financial baseline of the conference, to find ways to accomplish the mission and achieve the goals without all of the administrative overhead. We have to change our focus from supporting and trying to sustain an institutional model designed for an earlier time toward an alignment of our resources that makes sense for where we are today. Now, the good news is we've already studied all of this. All of the material that was preserved from the studies prior to February 2008 are still in existence. I haven't had a chance to read through much of the work that task force did. It was good work. It was solid work. And so now we have an opportunity to rethink what we do. Well, what does all this mean for us financially? I asked Bill Wyman to run some numbers for me around assumptions about fewer districts and varying components that might be entailed in that. He estimates that the conference would realize a reduction of $1.5 million a year in the budget if we went to 8 districts. That number would be around $1 million if we went to 10 districts. Now that money could be reallocated, or as the adaptive challenge says, we could redirect the flow. Some of it would be passed on in savings to local churches and their apportionments. Some of it would be passed on to help us start new churches, to reach new people, to expand the mission, and to strengthen the missional outreach of existing churches through a kind of grant process. Some have suggested to me that what we really need is more effective teaching and stewardship and extravagant generosity. Some have suggested that reducing the number of districts is simply a retreat in the face of hard economic times. I would say yes, we do indeed need to learn and practice biblical stewardship, and we need to do it immediately. We need to discover ways of sharing our resources for the work of Christ. However, when our giving returns to even higher levels than before 2008, when we've received more and more from gracious and generous believers like you, I would rather invest that money in the mission and the ministry that extends the kingdom of God through Christ on earth than in maintaining what we've always had. In other words, let's redirect the flow of our extravagant abundance toward increasing the number of vital churches engaged in missional outreach, reaching out in the name of Jesus, communities and in the world. Well, what's the bottom line of all this? Having looked at all these studies, having engaged in numerous conversations, worked around some new understandings of the role of the district superintendent, and reviewed all these financials, I think what we will be recommending that we move to 8 districts no later than January 2013. Now, as your bishop, I know this is risky. And some will say it's a bold and courageous move. Others will say it's just crazy. But if we're going to accomplish the mission, we must look at doing new things in a new way, trusting God for the resources, the courage, and the desire to make a difference. As I said earlier, my passion is about following Jesus and leading our conference toward more effective and more fruitful ways of making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. That transformation starts with each one of us individually and our way of serving in the world in the 21st century. I also realize this is a very risky step for the annual conference. We will vote on the number of districts, not the plan of organization. As all of you know, the details are always critical, and we will not have them finalized by annual conference. And yet I believe that we cannot wait another year to make this kind of decision. I will assure you that along with the transition team, I will keep everyone informed and will seek input on the design that will eventually emerge. I welcome your questions. I welcome your feedback. I'm certain there will be good discussion in these pre-conference briefings, and we'll have it again at annual conference. I believe fervently that it's all about the mission. It's all about the mission, making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world.